Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spark Shift Succeed. I am Mel Sodetze. It is great to have you with us. There is something powerful about bringing people together to pause, think differently, and have conversations that can genuinely shift the way we show up in our organizations. And that is exactly what today is about. Spark one conversation, insight, or new perspective that ignites something. Shift seeing things differently and changing how we think, lead, and work, and ultimately succeed, turning those shifts into better outcomes for our people. Today, we're focusing on something at the heart of all three: communication and culture. Culture isn't just about what's written on a wall, it's about what people experience. It's shaped through our conversations, how we lead, how we work together, and how connected people feel. When communication breaks down, people disconnect. But when it's intentional, people understand where we're going, why it matters, and how they can contribute. To take us through this conversation, we have someone that brings a powerful perspective on the relationship between communication, people, and culture. Carolyn Strauss understands that culture isn't created in isolation. It is built every day through our interactions, conversations, leadership, and the way we connect with one another. Today, Carolyn will challenge us to think about how we communicate, create alignment, and how those everyday interactions shape the experience of our employees and customers. So, as you listen, I want you to consider one question: what is the culture that my communication is creating? With that said, I'm very excited to welcome Carolyn Strauss. Carolyn, over to you.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled. Now, I have been studying reinvention for the past 3 years. I have a master's in reinvention. I'm one of 8 people globally who have this. And I'm coming to you from South Africa, which, having now spent more than a week here, and I've got 5 more weeks, I'm very excited. But having spent more than a week here, I am seeing the amount of things that are being reinvented here in South Africa. There are malls and restaurants and experiences here that are so far ahead of the rest of the world, especially way far ahead of the US, where I'm coming to you from right now. But I want to talk to you about this communication and trust issue. I want to share something. We are having a huge trust crisis globally. So employees, I don't know if you all are noticing this, but employees are actively quiet quitting. They are actively not engaged, and let me tell you why. When in the past, and even now, when we hire people, we hire them to do a clear job, and we promise them that that's what the job's going to be. With what's happening now, notice how your job, think about you and your job, how it's changed literally in the past 18 months with AI, how it's changed in the past, 3 years with the advent of the new technology. So with this rate of change, people, we engage in a company contract with the people that we have, which is, here's the job we're hiring for, here's what it's going to look like, and here's what we're asking you to do. And then boom, 3 months, 6 months later, they're asked to do something else. They're asked to do a job that they didn't know and how to do their job that they weren't invited to do when the contract was created. This is where we're getting the communication trust gap right now. So during this short time we have together, I'm going to give you a few ideas on how to clarify for your team members you have now, and for the ones that you're going to be bringing in, what their job might look like in the future. But this slide right here is what we call the communication trust gap. And let me tell you why we're having this. I want you all to think back to the 1900s. By the way, I'm a child of the 1900s. And for those of you who were born after the year 2000, when I say I'm a child of the 1900s, I was not brought up with a horse and buggy. Okay, I was brought up, with a Thunderbird convertible. Anyway, so when we look at the 1900s, we lived in a stable business environment, which meant after World War One, starting in about 1917 through 1989, you could start a business and run it for 75 years. You had 75 years to do the same thing. Now, you have all studied S curves, I'm sure, in your businesses. So if you look at an S curve, where you want to look at changing things is right in the middle of the S curve. So if we're looking at the 75-year range, in the middle of that S curve is 37 and a half years, which means that you could start a job in the mid 1900s, which is where, my parents started working in the, mid late 1900, in the mid, 60s, 70s. You could actually start working for a company, work for that company for 25, 30 years and never have a major disruption and retire with your gold watch and be done. This is actually where, if you think about the mid late 1900s, that's actually where all of our strategic planning was created, right, in the 1900s. Now, in 1989, major things happened, including here in South Africa. First, in 1989, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which caused globalization for economies. So supply chains and communications all shortened a lot. Then the advent of the internet, the World Wide Web, was launched in 1989. And for those of us here in South Africa, in 1989 was the beginning of the end of apartheid, because it was in February of 1990 that Nelson Mandela was let out of prison. So given those things, in 1989, we went from a 75-year cycle to a 15-year business cycle, which is radically different. So from 1989 until 2016, we were living in a 15-year cycle, which meant that your employees, your companies, your teams would not have had a major disruption, probably one in 7.5 years, that you'd have to adapt to. Now, in 2016, a major thing happened, and it was the communication of the smartphone. In 2016, more people got smartphones, the advent of the smartphone. We were globally connected, and things started changing faster than ever. So, starting in 2016, on average, we have a 3-year business cycle, and that's average. I'm talking about mining businesses. I'm talking about um, coal and oil. If you look at something like the fashion business, in fact, one of the things I love to ask is, what do a fashion business, an IT company, and a farm-to-table restaurant have in common? Anybody think? Anybody know? What they actually have in common is they need to reinvent every 2 to 3 months. So can we understand now that there is a huge communication need and a huge communication gap between what our team members expect, what our customers expect, what our clients expect, what our suppliers expect, because a lot of us were brought up in that 75 or even 15-year cycle, and we're now living in a much shorter cycle of 3 years or less. Now, why this is all happening and what's actually happening. When the Accenture Global Disruption Index, I want to invite you all to take a look at that. Until 2016, we were living in about a 4% disruption annually. And I'm talking about disruptions like the global economy, geopolitical disruptions, environmental disruptions, technology disruptions, right? Think of all of that. So until about 2016, we were living in a 4%, which meant about 4 times a year, there would be some disruption and it might not even hit you, right? Because it might be some kind of an environmental disruption that was happening somewhere else in the world. The world has changed so much. I couldn't believe it. When I looked at the Global Disruption Index, it is now, brace yourselves, take a breath, at 200%, which means that you can expect every other day some kind of a disruption. Have you noticed that meetings canceled? Have you noticed that people don't show up? Have you noticed that something happens geopolitically? And by the way, being an American, I apologize for what's happening, but something happens that is going to affect the world we're living in. So we have moved now from disruption to what is now called meta-ruption. Meta-ruption was coined, this term was coined by futurist Roger Spitz. You can look him up, he's brilliant. And it's defined as a multi-dimensional family of systemic disruptions. I mean systemic disruptions. This all ties back. Do you all remember when we talked about the black swan principle? And that was only like 20, 25 years ago, where there'd be all of these white swans. So things were normal, normal, normal. And then some really weird thing would happen, and we called it a black swan. What we're living in now is black swans are actually showing up in flocks, and they're having babies, and their babies are having babies. So just understand that the way we deal with this now is to take a deep breath and relax. Okay? What we're living in is chaos. And I used to think that chaos was a lack of order, right? That chaos was too many disparate things happening. What's actually happening now, I believe, my definition of chaos now, it's not the lack of order, it's too many orders competing for your attention. So my question for you is, where are you inviting your team members and your company to pay attention? In which area of your business do you want the focus to be, and what kind of a business do you want to have? Here's a little bit about me. I spent 18 years with the third largest clothing company on the Home Shopping Network, which is a major television retailer. We did $1 million worth of, I sold $1 million worth of product in one day. So if you're having sales challenges in your companies, that's a whole program that I could happily do for you. But the reason I bring this up is, being in the fashion business, I had to reinvent my clothing, what I sold, what I designed. Every month or month and a half, I had to tie into what did I do last month, and what am I going to invite you to do that makes it interesting and compelling enough for my clients, for my customers, to get off the couch or off of their desk to buy something they clearly didn't need and didn't know they wanted. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you. But one of the clearest ways to communicate with your team members is to figure out what kind of company you are. There are 3 types of companies, and I want you to zoom out if you're able and go macro with your company. What kind of company are you? Okay, here they are. There are 3 types of companies. The first one, customer centric. And by the way, these are in no preferential order at all. There's the customer centric company, there's the operational excellence company, and there's the product leader company. Okay, now, if you think about it, you need to be all 3 to be successful in business. You clearly have to have customers who know and like what you do, right? You have to have some operational processes in place where you can actually deliver what it is that your product or service is. And then product leader means you need to be known for something. So I want you to think about right now, if I were to ask you what kind of company you are, here's the hysterical thing. When I go in and work with a company and we do this exercise, which I think is so important, and I'm working with management team, all of the sales team believe that they're customer centric. All of the COO and the operations team believe that they're operational excellence. And the CEO and leadership all believe that they're a product leader, which is hilarious. But you can't be all three. You have to have excellence in all three areas. But I just want to share that you can't be all three because the resources that you're putting into each one are going to be different. So let me just show you really quick. Here's my example of a customer-centric company, and there are many of them, but hotels like Four Seasons, like Ritz, they empower their team members to go and take care of their customers no matter what their need is. Got it? So a customer-centric company is going to invest in their team members and hire the smartest team members. Okay? Operational excellence. Operational excellence, most of your investment goes into processes, equipment, so that you are standardized. The word for operational excellence is consistent. Like I can pluck somebody, I'm from Denver, Colorado. I can pluck somebody out of a fryer in Denver and put them into a fryer here in South Africa, in Johannesburg. So I passed some McDonald's when I was driving around yesterday, and they can actually do the same work. So are your processes where your work is, are you high volume at lower cost? And then the third one, a product leader company, somebody like Disney. Nobody can touch Disney. And what they're always trying to do is they're always trying to one up themselves the next time. Okay, so a product leader company will spend most of their money on R&D. What are we coming up next? What's the next product? What's the next tool, whatever. So I want to invite you guys to think about what kind of company you are. And this is a conversation that is crucial to have, especially now when our resources are being so spread thin. You can put your resource where they actually belong. So here are the three kinds of companies. Just wanted to share that back with you. Now, one other communication piece, and I know that I'm zipping through this. I'm trying to not go too quickly, but I want to give you some seriously great communication tools that you can use with your team where people will feel safer. By the way, one of the things that you need to know about people is when we hire them, they have all of this breadth, all of this space to be brilliant. And the less and less safe they feel, and the more this change is coming at them, they will give you less, and they have less capacity to take risk. So you're getting less and less. So what all of these tools that I'm giving you and sharing with you, and by the way, I have lots more, I'm sharing with you so that maybe we can open up space for people to take the risks that they're going to need to take to experiment going forward. But I really need to share this with you because how many times are you going to meetings and you don't need to be there? It happens all the time, right? So one of the processes that I go through with teams that I work with is let's figure out what kind of a meeting you're having. When you schedule a meeting, let's say for 3 p.m., is it an ideation meeting where you're coming up with new ideas and you're noodling around on what can we reinvent, what can we experiment with? You want the people who are idea people to know that this is the meeting they belong in. Next, an activation meeting. Is this a meeting to get everybody on board, to get everybody behind an idea that you had before, and now you want everybody on board? Or is it an implementation meeting? You've already come up with the ideas. Everybody knows what you're working on. What needs to happen now? And for me, I'm an idea person, right? When I used to in my company have to go to implementation meetings where it's like, okay, this is the fabric we're using, and this is the weight of the fabric, and this is how we're printing on this fabric, I would just die because all I wanted to do was redesign the fabric again. So, which meetings are you having? And you can include people from all different areas and who have those strengths. However, let people know what kind of a meeting you're having. Okay. And I know this might be new information for you all, but I'm happy to break it down with you. One really important piece on communication is I want to share this little video with you.
Almost out of time, Carolyn.
Okay, so the 3 Ds after a meeting. Here is why this is something I invented, and it is so beautiful because how many times have you gone to a meeting or do you have meetings in your company and you go to the meeting and at the end nothing happens? I want to invite you, this, if you take one thing away from today, it's if you could implement the 3 Ds in a meeting. What did we discuss? What did we decide? What are we going to do? And at the beginning of the meeting, you say to people, hey, we're going to do the 3 Ds. Do you know what that does? Is it causes everyone in the meeting to pay attention because they'll have to figure out, what did we discuss? What did we decide? What are we going to do? One of the reasons that team members are so frustrated is they don't feel like any action is being taken on what they contribute. So if you do the 3 Ds, everybody feels like they were heard. So there are 32 areas that you can reinvent in your business. I am not going to go into them right now. However, yes, I disappeared for a second. But when I come work with your company, one of the tools that I invented is the reinvention soccer ball. And what we do is we have a lot of fun throwing this around the room, and it's called a thumb ball. And wherever somebody's thumb lands, we get to have a conversation of, is this something that in your company makes sense to play with? I am going to pass this slide, this handout, onto the team at USBI. And if this is something that you want to have to just look at and work with your team, it is a gift from me to you. You guys can have it. And when they send out the follow-up on this recording, please ask, or Mel, I think you're going to include this, right, into the follow-up information. Anyway, this is me. This QR code takes you straight to my page on the USBI website. So please scan it. You can find out more about me there. This has been really fast. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but it is a joy. South Africa is my heart. This is my second time in your country. I was here for 2 weeks slash 3 weeks. I was supposed to go home after 2 weeks in April of 2024, and I loved it here so much. I opted to stay another week, so I changed my flights and I stayed another week. But I am here through the 2nd of October. So if any of this resonated with you and I can support you and help you with your businesses in any way, in either sales, communication, or really the rate and speed of change, I would love to be here with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was absolutely amazing. Really, really appreciate your insights. What a powerful conversation. I think you've given us a lot to sit with, particularly the idea that the world is no longer changing in predictable cycles. The pace of disruption is accelerating. And that really changes how we lead, right? How we make decisions and how we communicate. And I think back then we used to have the luxury of time. Today we don't. And perhaps the biggest question for leaders is no longer how do we respond when disruption happens? It's what you spoke about. How do we reinvent before we have to? I'm going to go into the chat facility. We do have a question from Paul. Paul says, Carolyn,
Okay.
what do you want your audiences thinking and feeling and doing differently after your talks? And could you give us an example where your talk created a noticeable shift afterwards?
Absolutely. I was working with a steel welding company. So that is a company that is in a long cycle in Canada. And we talked about what kind of company they are. Their salespeople thought they were customer centric. They are clearly an operational excellence company, but they're known throughout Canada as being the best. So that makes them a product leader. So what we focused on is being a product leader company for them with an operational excellence processes that are unmatchable, and that's what makes them a product leader. But notice they are not customer centric because they can't just make different beams of different sizes on a whim. Right. So it's so interesting to figure out, help companies figure out where are they putting their resources. And oh, by the way, one of my favorite exercises, Paul, thanks for asking this. One of my favorite exercises is called Kill Your Company Exercise. Doesn't that sound like fun? And it's an exercise, it was created by Harvard back in the early 2000s. You can actually look it up. And what we do is we get all of the stakeholders in the room together, like some of your really key team members from different departments. And oh, stop siloing people. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Silos don't work. Marketing teams that don't talk to sales teams, that don't talk to production teams, stop it. That is old thinking and it doesn't work anymore. But anyway, we get somebody from all of those teams together and the team and talk about what could possibly kill the company. And then what it does is it lets everybody see what might be coming. You know, in reinvention, you want to anticipate, design, and implement for change. You can anticipate what might be coming and then actually work together as a company to make sure that you're still viable in a year.
Carolyn, that was absolutely incredible. I think I have a question for from my side, really. I know that leaders or organizations call you when they have a problem with their leadership or communication or sales, as you mentioned. And my question for you is when leaders say we have a communication problem, is that sometimes just a convenient way of avoiding a harder truth that the real problem is maybe poor leadership, a lack of trust, or a culture people no longer believe in?
One of the challenges that consultants have now, like if you bring in a McKinsey or if you bring in one of those companies, they think they know. When a leader says to me, we have a communication problem, I say, okay, what are the results of that? What are you actually seeing that is the challenge that you're having? Because it's never a communication problem. It's like in marriages, right? People say, we're not communicating. What does that mean? Does that mean that somebody's like not throwing away their coffee grounds in the morning and that's a communication problem? I mean, so we don't know. So the answer to that, Mel, is I really can't answer that until I actually have a conversation. And that conversation, anybody that comes in and says, I know what to do, run fast because nobody can know anymore. But what I've done is I've been studying really hard for the past 5 years how to ask the right questions to get the right answers. So it may be trust, like you said. It may be an HR challenge where HR is thinking old school. It may be employees who were told that their job would be one thing and it ends up being another. So it's just it's all just a big process. Reinvention is no longer a project, it's now a process. So I can work with leadership to help them figure out where in the process they're getting stuck and how to move forward in a way that keeps everybody safe, calm, and wanting to work there. That's my job.
I love that, Carolyn. So much to think about, and unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank you so much for your incredible pearls of wisdom. And this conversation came at a critical time because we can't always control what changes around us, but we can control how we respond and how we communicate. So, thank you, Carolyn, for joining us, and thank you for such a thought provoking conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the real Spark Shift Succeed moment for today, what we choose to do differently. Now, with that said, thank you for joining us, and please join us next week for another incredible speaker, Riabetswe Molapo. Thank you so much, everyone, and see you soon again. Bye.